At the celebration banquet, Ethan stood on the stage, held the microphone, and said his only wish was to get a new wife. I froze in place. Beneath the stage, a young intern giggled loudly. "See, Mr. Miller? I told you. An old woman like her would be scared out of her mind the second she hears you don't want her anymore. A bet's a bet, Mr. Miller. You placed the highest bet, so Venmo me that $5,200 right now." The crowd burst into laughter. Ethan didn't even look at me. He walked straight down the stage. After transferring the money on his phone, he gently ruffled the young girl's hair with pure fondness in his eyes. Only after doing all of this did he finally turn to look at me, his tone completely casual. "Rachel, it was just to liven up the atmosphere. She's just a kid who likes to play around. Don't take it personally." He was absolutely sure that, just like in the past, I would swallow my pride, choke down the humiliation, and let it go. But this time, I picked up the microphone and spoke calmly. "What a coincidence, Ethan. How did you know that my wish is exactly the same as yours?" The laughter in the room stopped instantly. Ethan's face turned incredibly pale. He was the first to speak, his voice sharp. "Everyone was just joking. Why are you making a scene?" Before I could even reply, he waved his hand dismissively, his tone bordering on cruel. "Our managing director, Rachel, has been emotionally unstable lately. I apologize on her behalf." Chloe tilted her head, looking at me with a sweet, mocking smile. Could she be going through menopause? "Mr. Miller, do you smell that retirement home scent on her when you sleep at night?" After saying that, she quickly covered her mouth, pretending to look innocent. Ethan gave her a fake, gentle scold. "Chloe, don't talk like that." But looking at the warmth and indulgence in his eyes, there wasn't a single shred of real anger in his voice. It was pure, unfiltered favoritism. Chloe easily picked up on Ethan's protection, which only made her act more spoiled and arrogant. People around us started whispering and snickering, throwing mocking glances at me. A sharp pain pierced my chest, spreading through my entire body. 10 years. I had stayed by his side, watching him go from having absolutely nothing to building a multi-million-dollar company. And yet, all I got in return was him protecting another young girl in public, while dragging my dignity through the mud. I pushed down the bitterness in my throat, took a deep breath, and spoke coldly. "Chloe, for public gambling, defamation, and slander, you should know that I can not only fire you right now, but I can also have my lawyers destroy you." Chloe's face turned instantly white. She instinctively hid behind Ethan. The sight of their intimacy burned my eyes. In the next second, Ethan stepped forward. Just like the way he used to protect me, he shielded Chloe completely behind his broad shoulders. "Rachel, cut the boss act. 10 years ago, when you got fired over a stupid $200 mistake and cried your eyes out, weren't you the one begging?" Looking at him now, I felt nothing but a hollow sense of mockery. Yes. If Ethan hadn't beaten someone up back then, I wouldn't have been fired and I wouldn't have almost starved to death because I couldn't afford the rent. Back then, he had cupped my tear-stained face in his hands, his eyes fierce and dead serious as he promised. "If anyone ever dares to disrespect you again, I'll risk my life to make them pay." But now, the very man who swore to protect me for the rest of my life was holding up the umbrella for the person stabbing me. How ironic. Ethan didn't want to argue with me in public anymore. He grabbed my wrist and dragged me into the private VIP lounge next door. He threw me onto the leather sofa. My high heels scraped against my ankle, drawing blood. I gasped in pain. Ethan paused for a second, but his voice remained cold and hard. "You can't even walk in heels, yet you insist on wearing them. You love making things hard for yourself. No wonder you're always targeting a young girl. If you're done throwing a tantrum, go home. I have things to take care of." Without another glance, he turned on his heel and walked out. I sat frozen on the sofa for a long time before finally pulling out my phone. My Snapchat was filled with updates from the company employees. Chloe's post was right at the top. It had 2 photos. One was a screenshot of the $5,200 Venmo transfer, captioned, "From the man I admire the most." The other was a selfie of her and Ethan, standing extremely close. Chloe's cheeks were flushed, and Ethan was looking down at her with a gentle smile. The comment section was filled with her friends dropping passive-aggressive hints about how I had a horrible temper and lacked any charm. I looked down at the beautiful but painfully tight high heels on my feet, and the truth finally sank in. Some people are meant to share your struggles, but they can never share your success. The warmth we once shared and the vows he made were real. But his current coldness and his betrayal were just as real. I opened my phone. The reservation for the luxury cruise tickets for 2 was still sitting in my app. I had tried countless times to piece back together this broken, 10-year relationship. But now, with a simple tap of my finger, I canceled Ethan's ticket. Then I messaged my divorce lawyer. For the rest of this journey, I would never wait for anyone again. It was past midnight when I got home. That night, I dreamed of the heavy blizzard from 10 years ago. In our tiny, cramped apartment, Ethan and I huddled together for warmth. We had no parents to help us, no wealthy backgrounds, nothing but our own two hands to fight for a future. Back then, I was always insecure because I was 5 years older than him. But one day, he came home, mysteriously pulled open his shirt, and showed me his chest. It was still bleeding, but my name, Rachel, was freshly tattooed over his heart. His eyes were incredibly bright as he wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "Don't be scared anymore. If I ever stop loving you, Ethan Miller, my life won't have any meaning left." Those days of struggling in the mud and keeping each other warm flashed through my dreams over and over again. When I opened my eyes, I was brought back to the shattered reality of 10 years later. Ethan was sitting by the edge of the bed, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "If I don't come home, you just hide under the blanket and cry? Rachel, would it kill you to just back down for once?" I turned my back to him, refusing to say a word. He let out a heavy sigh, leaned back against the sofa, and said casually, "Rachel, you can't even get pregnant. Honestly, I've already done more than enough for you over the years. Besides, I came back to tell you that Chloe is pregnant. Don't go looking for trouble with her." His tone was so casual, yet his words stabbed directly into my deepest wound. I bolted up, grabbed the bedside lamp, and hurled it straight at him. My voice shook violently. "Ethan, if I hadn't walked through a raging blizzard for 2 hours to secure that contract for your business, my child would be here calling me mom right now. How can you even say that to me? Are you even human?" Perhaps the raw agony on my face was too obvious. Looking at my bloodshot eyes, his expression finally softened slightly. "I can't spend my entire life tied to a woman who brings nothing to the table anymore. You know how it is. Even the most loyal man gets tired." Wiping away the tears from the corners of my eyes, I let out a mocking laugh. "What? Do you want me to get down on my knees and thank you?" The annoyance in his eyes flared up again. "Are you done yet? Losing that baby was your own fault for not being careful. You brought that on yourself. Chloe is so much younger than you, yet she's gentle and understanding. Look at yourself now. You're completely unreasonable." He slammed the door and left. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, the moment I walked into the office, Chloe was already waiting for me. Holding a cup of hot coffee, she gave me a smug, malicious smile. "Rachel, Ethan told me last night to focus on prenatal care for the baby. I guess he's really sick of women like you." Without even looking up, I snapped back. "Prenatal care? Teaching the kid how to be a homewrecker just like you." Chloe's expression turned nasty. Just as she was about to snap back, she heard Ethan's footsteps approaching from behind. With a sudden gasp, she threw herself forward, spilling the scalding coffee all over my arm. My skin turned instantly red and began to blister. She grabbed my wrists, her fingernails digging deep into my flesh. "Rachel, I truly came here to apologize. Even if you hate me, please, for the sake of the baby, just let me go." Ethan kicked my office door open and roared at me. "Rachel, don't push your luck. Do you really think you own this place? I'm telling you, if anything happens to Chloe or the baby, I will make you pay." With that, he scooped Chloe into his arms and walked out in front of everyone. Employees gathered in the hallway, whispering and watching the drama. My arm throbbed with intense pain. A wave of overwhelming despair washed over me, followed by a sudden, sharp pain in my lower abdomen. My vision went black, and I collapsed onto the floor. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. As I struggled to sit up, a nurse rushed over and gently pushed me back down. She said, "You're pregnant. You need to rest. Stop working yourself to death." I froze, staring at her in complete disbelief. Right at that moment, Ethan's voice echoed from outside the ward. Ethan pushed the door open, his eyes completely cold. "Rachel, you really love playing the victim, don't you? The moment Chloe gets hospitalized, you put yourself in a hospital bed too. Are you that desperate for attention?" I looked up at him. For a split second, I wanted to tell him that I was pregnant, but his baseless accusations made me shut my mouth. I had nothing left to say to him. Whatever love and warmth I once had for him had already decayed in my throat after his countless acts of betrayal. Seeing my silence, his expression grew even colder. He turned to leave. "Whatever. Play your little games, all you want. I'm not playing along." The room fell into a dead silence. I slowly placed my hand over my still flat stomach. The moment I get discharged, I'm taking my baby and leaving Ethan, and leaving this place of heartbreak. Overwhelmed by exhaustion, I drifted off to sleep. When I woke up again, it was pitch black outside. Standing right beside my bed, holding my pregnancy test results, was Chloe. Sensing that I was awake, she whipped her head toward me, her eyes filled with venom and jealousy. Rachel, why do you have to ruin everything for me right now? I tried to sit up, but my body felt completely drained of energy. Seeing my movement, Chloe assumed I was going to find Ethan. She stepped forward, blocking me, her voice distorted with rage. You shameless bitch. You refused to sign the divorce papers, and now you want to use this brat to keep your position. I didn't want to waste my breath on her. I reached out to press the call button on the headboard, but Chloe shrieked and threw herself at me. Since you won't listen, you and your little brat can go to hell. The sudden force of her impact knocked me off balance. I fell off the bed, my lower abdomen slamming violently against the sharp corner of the bedside table. An excruciating pain exploded from my abdomen, radiating through my entire body. As the room spun, I felt a warm gush of fluid between my legs. The ward door was suddenly pushed open, and Ethan rushed in. I saw him frown, stepping toward me. Ethan, save my baby. Before I could finish, Chloe grabbed Ethan's arm tightly. Clutching her own stomach, she sobbed pitifully. Ethan, don't blame Rachel. Loving you was my fault to begin with. If punishing me makes her happy, I don't mind. But Ethan, my stomach hurts so bad. Is our baby going to be okay? Her tears streamed down her face as she whimpered. Ethan's face turned incredibly pale. The slight worry in his eyes when he looked at me instantly turned into disgust. Rachel, just because you lost your baby years ago doesn't mean everyone has to suffer for your bitterness. You've gone too far this time. I couldn't save our first child, but I will not lose this one. He carefully picked Chloe up in his arms and rushed out of the room. The door slammed shut, leaving me entirely alone. The sticky, warm blood soaked through my clothes. I slowly closed my eyes. I knew this baby was gone too. When I was finally woken up by my phone, it was a voice message from Ethan. There was no apology, no worry. Just a casual, dismissive tone. Chloe wanted to go to the beach, so I'm taking her trip. No one is watching your little performance anymore, so stop acting. I slowly put my phone down and placed my hand over my empty stomach. My heart didn't hurt anymore. There was only a vast, endless numbness. I opened my contacts, found my best friend, Lily, who lived abroad, and transferred all my business shares and assets to her. I had originally wanted to keep some dignity and get a peaceful divorce. But now there was no need for that. In the days that followed, besides recovering, I focused entirely on drafting the divorce agreement and finalizing the asset transfer. Once everything was settled, I went back to the apartment to pack my things. The place was a mess, filled with traces of the two of them. I ignored it all and packed quietly. There was no nostalgia, no regret. Halfway through packing, Ethan called. Chloe is pregnant, and it's not convenient for her to move around. Pack your things and get out. She's moving in. I picked up our framed wedding photo from the wall, tossed it into the trash can, and said calmly, "Okay." Silence fell on the other end of the line. He clearly didn't expect me to agree so easily. After all, during our 10 years together, whenever something like this happened, I would fight him tooth and nail. Ethan's voice carried a hint of surprise. "This is our wedding house. Have you forgotten?" My hand paused for a second. A bone-chilling coldness swept through me. So he did remember what this home meant to me. Yet, he still chose to trample over my boundaries in the most humiliating way possible. I took a deep breath and said softly, "It's fine. Do whatever you want." My compliance seemed to anger him even more. "Fine. Great. Since you don't care about anything anymore, then hand over your managing director position to Chloe too." I didn't say another word. I hung up, labeled my boxes, and called the moving company. My cruise was leaving in 5 hours. Just as I was about to walk out the door, a group of workers pushed their way in and started smashing the place up. I blocked them, frowning. "Who gave you permission to break into my apartment?" One of the workers replied without looking up. "Mr. Miller's orders. We're tearing this place down to remodel it exactly how Miss Chloe wants it." Right then, Chloe appeared at the doorway with a smug smile on her face. "Rachel, no matter how hard you try, Ethan still chose me in the end. Just give up." Looking at her arrogant face, I found it hilarious. I didn't bother arguing with her and walked toward the elevator. But as soon as the doors opened, I ran straight into Ethan. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "Business trip." Hearing my reply, he relaxed his grip on my arm and said arrogantly, "Don't think you can skip Chloe's promotion ceremony by using a business trip as an excuse. You have to be there." I didn't even spare him a glance as I stepped into the elevator. After all, how could he know that I would be boarding a luxury cruise this afternoon? And once the cruise trip ended, I would fly straight to the country where Lily lived. I was never coming back. Ethan stared at my retreating figure, his voice filled with threats and spite. Rachel, you better not regret this. Even if you come back crying and begging me on your knees, I won't take you back. The elevator doors closed, heading down. I completely shut out the place that held all my youth and agony. Ethan thought I was just throwing another tantrum and decided to play a game of chicken with me. By the time Chloe's promotion meeting started, all the company executives had arrived. Chloe clutched her stomach, looking weakly at Ethan. Ethan, is Rachel not coming because of me? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have accepted this promotion. Ethan's brows furrowed deeply, his face dark with anger. She's crossed the line this time, bringing her personal tantrums into a board meeting. When she gets back, I'll make sure she apologizes to you. He spoke with absolute certainty, as if I would walk through that door in the next second, crying and admitting my mistakes. Just then, there was a soft knock on the door. The receptionist walked in holding a package. Mr. Miller, a courier just delivered this. They said it's a special gift for you and must be signed by you personally. Ethan's eyes lit up slightly, and a smirk played on his lips. He was sure this was my way of begging for forgiveness. Once again, he thought he had won. With a hint of anticipation in his voice, he said, "Open it." The assistant opened the package, but in the next second, her expression froze. Inside, there were no flowers, no apology note. Just two documents. A signed divorce agreement and a share transfer document. The heavy oak door of the conference room clicked shut behind the receptionist, leaving a dense, expectant silence in its wake. Ethan smirked, his fingers casually tapping the polished mahogany table. He looked around the room at the board members, his eyes lingering on Chloe, who sat in the seat formerly reserved for the managing director. She looked radiant, if slightly pale, her hands resting protectively over her flat stomach. "Open it," Ethan said, his voice carrying the lazy confidence of a man who believed the world existed solely to accommodate his whims. "Let's see what kind of dramatic peace offering my wife has sent us today." The assistant took a pair of sleek metal scissors, sliced through the packing tape, and pulled out a thick, legal-grade manila envelope. She reached inside and withdrew two heavy documents bound in dark blue cardstock. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply stared at the first page, her face draining of color so fast it looked as if she had seen a ghost. "Well," Ethan prompted, his smirk faltering slightly at her silence. "Read it. Out loud. What is it? A tear-stained letter? A handmade watch?" The assistant swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously between Ethan and Chloe. "Mr. Miller, it's not an apology. It's a finalized, legally binding share transfer agreement, executed 48 hours ago." Ethan's brow furrowed. "A share transfer? To who? Me?" "No, sir," the assistant whispered, her voice trembling. "To Lily Vance. Of Vance Global Holdings." The room went dead silent. Vance Global Holdings was the single largest venture capital firm in the region, owned by the family of Rachel's childhood best friend, Lily. For years, Lily had begged Rachel to leave Ethan and join her abroad, but Rachel had always refused, choosing instead to sink every ounce of her soul, her health, and her personal capital into Ethan's startup. "What do you mean, Vance Global?" Ethan barked, slamming his palm onto the table. The water glasses rattled. "Rachel owns 45% of this company. I own 45%. The remaining 10% is held by the minor board members. She can't just transfer 45% of the company's voting shares without my consent. Actually, Mr. Miller, she can." One of the senior legal advisors at the end of the table spoke up, his voice cold and analytical. He had already pulled up the company's founding charter on his tablet. "Under Section 8 of our incorporation bylaws, which you signed 10 years ago when you were desperate for Rachel's initial seed funding, Rachel holds unrestricted right of transfer for her founder's shares. She doesn't need board approval, and because she has transferred them to a registered corporate entity, Vance Global now controls 45% of Miller Group." Ethan's heart did a strange, violent flip in his chest. "So what? Even if she transferred them, I still have 45%. We're equal partners. She can't lock me out." "Mr. Miller, you don't understand," the advisor continued, his face grim. "Look at the second document." Ethan snatched the blue folder from the assistant's hands. His eyes scanned the document, his vision blurring as he took in the bold, black lettering at the top of the page. Petition for dissolution of marriage and asset division. But it wasn't just a standard divorce filing. Attached to the petition was a forensic audit of the company's accounts, alongside a formal notification of a unilateral freeze on all joint marital assets, including the corporate guarantee accounts. She froze the expansion funds? Ethan's voice cracked, losing its sharp, dominant edge. The expansion funds were secured using the marital home and Rachel's personal assets as collateral, the advisor explained, looking at Ethan with a mixture of pity and professional disgust. Since she is contesting the marriage and alleging financial misconduct, specifically your public transfer of corporate funds to an intern under the guise of recreation, the bank has temporarily frozen the credit line. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Miller Group is in default on the construction loans for the new tech park. That's impossible, Chloe cried out, her sweet, high-pitched voice suddenly sounding incredibly shrill. Ethan, she can't do that. What about my promotion? What about the new office she was supposed to sign over to me today? Ethan didn't hear her. He was staring at the signature at the bottom of the divorce papers. Rachel Vance Miller. The handwriting was clean, elegant, and completely devoid of the shaky hesitation he had expected. There was no smear of tears on the paper. No lingering scent of her perfume. Just cold, blue ink that effectively severed their 10-year history with a single stroke. Call her, Ethan ordered the assistant, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. Now. Get her on the phone. I tried, sir, the assistant said, looking down at her shoes. Her personal number has been disconnected. I called her lawyer, and they said all future communications must go through their legal department. They also mentioned. She hesitated. What? Ethan roared. They mentioned that they have filed a formal police report regarding the incident at the hospital last night. They are citing physical endangerment and domestic negligence. They have requested the hospital's security footage. Chloe's face turned paper white. She instinctively grabbed Ethan's arm, her long, manicured nails digging into his suit jacket. Ethan, she's lying. I didn't do anything to her. She fell on her own. You saw it, right? You told me. She was just acting. Ethan looked down at Chloe. For the first time in months, the soft, protective warmth in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of irritation. Let go of me, he muttered, pulling his arm away. He pulled out his own phone and frantically dialed Rachel's number. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. He tried her WeChat, her WhatsApp, her email. You are no longer in this user's contact list. Message undeliverable. He opened Snapchat. The app showed a gray icon next to her name. She had deleted her account. At that moment, the double doors of the boardroom were pushed open. Two tall men in tailored dark gray suits stepped inside, followed by a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and short-cropped hair. Ethan recognized her instantly. It was Sarah Lynn, the chief legal counsel for Vance Global. Good morning, gentlemen and ladies, Sarah said, her voice echoing off the glass walls of the high-rise office. She walked to the head of the table, completely ignoring Chloe, and laid her leather briefcase down. As of 9 a.m. today, Vance Global Holdings has assumed control of 45% of the voting shares of Miller Group. Additionally, we have acquired the 5% minority stake previously held by Director Zhao, giving us a 50% controlling interest. Ethan stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Director Zhao sold his shares? To you? He's been my partner for 8 years. Director Zhao is a businessman, Mr. Miller, Sarah replied with a polite, razor-sharp smile. When a company's CEO publicly humiliates his co-founder and managing director, behaves recklessly with corporate funds, and invites a PR disaster by parading an intern around, smart investors sell their shares before the ship sinks. We bought him out at 20% above market value. He was thrilled to leave. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, sliding them across the table toward Ethan. Effective immediately, we are calling for an extraordinary general meeting to restructure the board. Furthermore, we are blocking the appointment of Chloe Jiang to any managerial position within this firm, citing a lack of professional qualification and a direct conflict of interest. You can't do this, Chloe screamed, stepping forward, her face distorted with rage. Ethan is the founder. He built this company. Sarah Lynn finally turned her gaze to Chloe. It was a look of such absolute, chilling indifference that Chloe actually took half a step back. Mr. Miller may have been the face of the company, Sarah said softly, but Rachel was the intellect, the operations, and the financial spine. Without her, this company is nothing more than a flashy shell with a massive debt load.
And
As for you, Ms. Zhang, I suggest you spend less time worrying about promotions and more time consulting a criminal defense attorney. The security footage from the hospital VIP ward has already been subpoenaed. Ethan felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. The room seemed to be
spinning.
only a few hours ago, he had been the king of his own castle, convinced that Rachel would eventually crawl back to him, apologizing for her tantrums as she always did. He had truly believed that her 10-year devotion was an unbreakable
Leash.
but the leash hadn't just broken. Rachel had taken the collar, wrapped it around his neck, and handed the chain to the wolves. The sea breeze was cool and clean, carrying the sharp scent of salt and open
Air.
Rachel stood on the private balcony of her suite on the Oceanic Empress, her hands resting lightly on the white wooden railing. The massive luxury cruise liner glided smoothly through the deep blue waters of the Pacific, leaving a long, foaming wake behind it. She was wearing a loose, comfortable linen dress and flat leather sandals. For the first time in 10 years, her feet didn't ache. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't have to worry about a client dinner, a marketing strategy, or whether Ethan had eaten his lunch. She looked down at her arm. The red, blistered skin where Chloe had spilled the scalding coffee was healing, covered by a thin layer of soothing ointment.
The
Deep scratches from Chloe's nails had scabbed over, fading into thin, silver
lines.
Her physical wounds were mending, but the space beneath her ribs still felt hollow and strange. Still staring at the water? Rachel turned to see Lily walking onto the balcony, holding 2 cups of fresh chamomile tea. Lily was dressed in casual resort wear, her bright eyes filled with a warmth that Rachel hadn't experienced in years. "It's beautiful," Rachel said, accepting the warm cup. "It's so quiet out here. I forgot what quiet felt like." "That's because you spent 10 years living in a construction zone of Ethan's ego," Lily said, leaning against the railing next to her. "How are you feeling?" "Really?" Rachel took a slow sip of her tea. She closed her eyes, listening to the steady, rhythmic hum of the ship's engines. "I feel light," she murmured. "But sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and my hand starts shaking. I still expect to hear him screaming at me, or demanding that I fix some mess he made." "That's trauma, honey," Lily said gently, placing a hand over Rachel's.
It
"Takes time to wash away 10 years of poison. But you're safe now. He can't touch you here. The lawyers have established a complete legal wall. He doesn't even know which country you're heading to." Rachel looked out at the endless horizon, where the blue of the sea met the pale blue of the sky. She thought about the baby she had lost 10 years ago, the child she had miscarried because she had walked through a freezing blizzard for 2 hours to secure their first major corporate contract. Ethan had cried that night, holding her in the cold hospital room, swearing that he would make up for it. And then, she thought about the baby she had lost just days ago. The memory of the warm blood pooling on the cold tile of the hospital floor made her throat tighten, but there were no tears left in her eyes. The pain had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard diamond of absolute resolve. "He told me it was my fault," Rachel said softly, her voice devoid of emotion. "When I lost the first baby, he said I wasn't careful enough. And when I was lying on the floor bleeding this time, he took Chloe to the beach because he thought I was acting to get attention." Lily's grip on Rachel's hand tightened, her knuckles turning white. "He's a monster, Rachel. A narcissistic, hollow shell of a man who used your brilliant mind to climb out of the gutter and then tried to destroy you so he wouldn't have to admit he owed you everything." "He doesn't owe me anymore," Rachel said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I'm taking back everything I gave him. Every single contract, every client relationship, every ounce of my reputation. I built Miller Group."
he was
"Just the megaphone." "Sarah called me an hour ago," Lily said, a small, satisfied smirk appearing on her lips. The board meeting was a bloodbath. Ethan tried to throw a tantrum, but Sarah shut him down in 3 minutes. "The banks have officially suspended their corporate credit lines. Their stock price is already dipping in the private markets." Rachel didn't smile. She felt no joy, only a profound sense of inevitability. "Let them drown," Rachel said, turning back to the sea. "I have a new life to build." Over the next 4 days of the cruise, Rachel slept. She ate fresh fruit, read books that had nothing to do with business, and walked along the deck at sunset. Slowly, the gray paleness of her skin was replaced by a healthy, sun-kissed
glow.
the dark circles under her eyes faded. By the time the ship docked in Singapore, their transit point before flying to Lily's estate in Zurich, Rachel looked like a completely different woman. She looked like the Rachel of 10 years ago, sharp, beautiful, and completely unbroken. Back in the bustling metropolis, the atmosphere inside the Miller Group headquarters was suffocating. Ethan sat at his desk, his tie loosened, his hair messy and unwashed. The floor was littered with crumpled papers, half-empty coffee cups, and printouts of financial statements that read like a horror story. It had been 2 weeks since Rachel left, and the company was in free fall. "What do you mean? Velotech is pulling out of the merger?" Ethan shouted into his desk phone, his voice hoarse. "We've been negotiating this for 6 months. The contracts were practically finalized. Mr. Miller, Velotech's CEO, was very clear," his operations manager said over the speakerphone, his voice trembling with exhaustion. "The key person clause in the preliminary agreement specifically stated that Rachel Vance was to oversee the integration process. Now that she is no longer with the company, they are exercising their right to terminate negotiations. They don't trust your management team, sir." "My management team? I am the CEO." "Yes, sir, but Rachel was the one who negotiated their supply chain logistics. Frankly, nobody else here knows how she managed to get those customs clearances in Europe. The documentation is entirely in her personal files, and we don't have the access codes." Ethan slammed the phone down, his breathing ragged. He didn't want to admit it, but he was drowning. For 10 years, he had lived under the illusion that he was a business genius. He was the one who gave the keynote speeches, the one who shook hands with politicians, the one who appeared on the covers of local tech magazines. But now that the machine's engine was gone, he realized he didn't even know how to oil the gears. Every major client he called asked for Rachel. Every supplier demanded to speak with Director Vance. When he tried to handle the negotiations himself, he found himself utterly lost in the complex legal jargon and financial projections that Rachel used to prepare for him overnight. The office door opened and Chloe walked in. She was no longer wearing her designer dresses. Instead, she wore a simple maternity top, her face covered in thick makeup to hide the stress lines around her eyes. "Ethan," she whined, her voice instantly grating on his raw nerves. "The HR department just sent me a termination notice. They said my internship contract is expired and they aren't renewing it. You have to fire whoever wrote that letter." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes cold and hollow. "I can't fire them, Chloe. The HR director was appointed by Vance Global. They control 50% of the board now. I can't make a single staffing decision without their approval." "But what about our baby?" Chloe cried, walking over and grabbing his shoulder. "We're supposed to move into the new apartment next week. The interior designers said they stopped working because the credit card was declined. The credit card was declined because Rachel froze the joint accounts."
Ethan
roared, finally snapping. He stood up, towering over her, his face dark with fury. "Do you have any idea what kind of trouble we're in? The company is facing a liquidity crisis. If we don't secure a $5 million bridge loan by the end of the month, we'll have to file for bankruptcy." Chloe shrank back, her eyes wide with fear. She had never seen Ethan look at her like this. In the past, he was always gentle, always indulgent, treating her like a fragile princess. But you're Ethan Miller," she stammered. "You're a millionaire. You can just borrow money from your friends." "My friends?" Ethan let out a harsh, self-deprecating laugh. "Every friend I have in this industry is a vulture. The moment they smelled blood in the water, they turned off their phones. Even the bank managers who used to beg me to take loans won't return my calls. They know Rachel is gone. They know the brain of this company has left." He walked over to the glass window, looking down at the city below. A sudden, sharp memory hit him. 10 years ago, in their freezing, rented apartment, Rachel had stayed up for 3 nights straight, drinking cheap instant coffee and wrapping herself in a threadbare blanket just to draft a business proposal for their first client. When she finally finished, her hands were so stiff from the cold she couldn't even hold a pen. He had held her hands in his, blowing warm air on her fingers, and promised her, "When we make it, Rachel, you'll never have to work a day in your life.
I'll
build an empire for you." But she hadn't wanted him to build an empire for her. She had built it with him, and he had treated her like a disposable stepping stone. At that moment, his personal phone rang. He lunged for it, hoping against hope that it was Rachel. Perhaps she had cooled
Down.
Perhaps she missed him. Perhaps she realized that 10 years of marriage couldn't be thrown away so easily. The caller ID showed an unknown number. He swiped to answer, his voice breathless. Rachel? Mr. Miller? A professional, unfamiliar voice answered. This is Detective Chen from the 1st District Police Department. We are calling regarding the domestic assault and negligence investigation filed by Ms. Rachel Vance. Ethan's hand went cold. I told you, that was a misunderstanding. My wife is just emotionally unstable. Mr. Miller, we have obtained the surveillance footage from the hospital VIP corridor. The detective interrupted, his tone completely flat and official. The footage clearly shows Ms. Chloe Jiang physically initiating contact with Ms. Vance, grabbing her wrists and pulling her toward the floor. It also shows you entering the room, refusing to assist the victim, who is visibly bleeding, and instead removing Ms. Jiang from the scene. The detective paused, the silence on the line heavier than a lead weight. Furthermore, the medical examiner has submitted the report regarding Ms. Vance's miscarriage. We are officially opening an investigation into Ms. Jiang for third-degree assault and intentional physical harm resulting in termination of pregnancy. You are also being summoned for questioning as an accessory to negligence. Ethan slowly lowered the phone, his hand trembling so violently he could barely hold it. He turned his head to look at Chloe. She was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to the conversation. She looked small, petulant, and incredibly shallow. This is the girl I destroyed my life for? Ethan thought, a wave of cold, sickening dread washing over him. This is the girl I traded Rachel for? A week later, the cracks in Chloe's perfect facade began to widen into a chasm. The legal pressure was mounting daily. Sarah Lynn's legal team was relentless, filing motion after motion, freezing every asset they could find. Ethan was forced to sell his luxury sports cars just to pay the retainer fees for a criminal defense attorney for Chloe. But the worst blow was yet to come. We need to go to the hospital, Ethan said one morning, his voice hollow as he adjusted his collar in the mirror. He looked 10 years older, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot. Why? Chloe asked, looking up from her vanity. She was applying a thick layer of concealer under her eyes. I don't want to go to the hospital.
The smell of
disinfectant makes me sick. The police are demanding a formal medical assessment of your pregnancy, Ethan said, turning to look at her. Our lawyer said that if we can prove the stress of the situation is actively endangering your pregnancy, we can request a deferral of your court appearance. We need a certified ultrasound and a doctor's report. Chloe's hand froze midair, the makeup sponge slipping from her fingers and falling onto the marble counter. I already have a doctor's report, she said, her voice rising in pitch.
I
can just show them the one from last month. The police won't accept a month-old report from a private clinic, Ethan said, his brows furrowing. He walked over to her, his gaze sharp and suspicious. They want a government-certified assessment. What's the big deal? We'll just go to the City General Hospital. It'll take 2 hours. No, Chloe suddenly shrieked, standing up so fast she knocked her chair over. I'm not going to City General. Their doctors are terrible. They don't know anything. Ethan stared at her. Over the past few weeks, Chloe had avoided every mention of prenatal checkups. Every time he offered to go with her, she made an excuse. Either she had already gone with her mother or her private doctor had done a home visit. He remembered the night at the hospital when Rachel was bleeding on the floor and Chloe had clutched her stomach, screaming that she was in excruciating pain. Yet, the next day, she was perfectly fine, begging him to take her to the beach. A dark, horrifying suspicion began to take root in Ethan's mind. Chloe, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet whisper. Give me your medical file. I left it at my mom's house, she stammered, her eyes darting toward the
door.
Ethan didn't say another word. He walked over to her designer handbag sitting on the bed, unzipped it, and dumped the contents onto the mattress. Ethan, what are you doing? Stop, Chloe screamed, lunging forward to grab the bag, but Ethan shoved her back with one arm. He rummaged through her lipstick, her keys, her designer wallet, until his fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper in the inner pocket. He pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a medical report from a private clinic dated 3 weeks ago. His eyes scanned the medical jargon, searching for the baby's heart rate, the gestational age, anything. But there was no baby. The report clearly stated, patient Chloe Jiang, HCG, levels normal.
No.
Gestational sac detected. Patient is not pregnant. Beneath that was another document, a printed invoice from an online novelty shop for a realistic fake positive pregnancy test and high-resolution, generic 8-week ultrasound scan. The room became so quiet that the only sound was the frantic, shallow breathing of the girl standing in front of him. Ethan looked at the papers, then looked up at Chloe. You lied to me, he whispered, his voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated rage. Ethan, hear me out, Chloe sobbed, throwing herself at his feet, grabbing his trousers just like she had done at the office. I only did it because I loved you so much. I knew you would never leave Rachel unless you had a reason.
She
couldn't give you a child, but I wanted to. I was going to get pregnant, I
swear.
We were trying every night. Ethan looked down at her, feeling a wave of intense, physical disgust. He remembered how he had stood over Rachel, who was bleeding and crying for her baby, and screamed at her. I couldn't save our first child, but I will not lose this one. He had abandoned his actual wife, the woman who had sacrificed her body, her youth, and her health for him to protect a lying, scheming sociopath who had faked a pregnancy just to climb the social ladder. He had allowed his actual child, the baby Rachel was carrying, to die on a cold hospital floor because of this lie. You're a monster, Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. Ethan, please. Chloe wept, her makeup running down her face in ugly, black
streaks.
We can still make it work. I love you. I'll get pregnant right now. We can have a baby. Get out, Ethan said, his voice completely dead. Ethan. Get out, he screamed, his voice shattering the windows of the apartment.
He
grabbed her by the arm, dragged her toward the front door, and threw her out into the hallway, slamming the heavy door shut. He collapsed against the door, sliding down to the floor. The silence of the empty apartment closed in around him like a tomb. He looked around the spacious, modern living room. This was the home he and Rachel had bought together. This was the place where they had celebrated their first $1 million contract, drinking cheap champagne on the floor because they hadn't bought furniture yet. And now, there was nothing left. No wife, no child, no company, no dignity. He pulled up his shirt, looking at his left breast. The tattoo of her name, Rachel, was still there, freshly scarred from his attempts to scratch it off during his drunken rages. Don't be scared anymore, his own voice from 10 years ago whispered in his memory. If I ever stop loving you, Rachel, my life won't have any meaning left. Ethan curled his knees to his chest and for the first time in 10 years he sobbed like a child. 4 months later, the Swiss city of Zurich was covered in a pristine, white blanket of winter snow. The air was crisp and cold, but inside the glass and steel skyscraper of Vance Global's European headquarters, it was warm and bustling. Rachel stood in the center of the executive suite, wearing a tailored navy blue wool suit. Her hair was cut into a chic, sharp bob, and her eyes were bright with focus. On the large digital screen in front of her, the final metrics of the new European supply chain launch were displayed in bright green numbers. Congratulations, Director Vance, the operations director said, clapping his hands. The European integration is complete. We've secured the exclusive distribution rights for 3 of the largest tech firms in Germany and France. The projected revenue for the first quarter is already 20% above our initial estimates. Rachel smiled, a genuine, relaxed expression. Thank you, Marcus. It was a team effort. Please ensure the logistics crew gets a double bonus this month. They worked around the clock in this weather. Will do, Director. As the team filed out of the room, Lily walked in, holding a tablet and 2 cups of hot chocolate. You look like a proper corporate queen, Lily said, handing her a cup. I swear, the Zurich air suits you. You look younger than you did 5 years ago. It's amazing what a full 8 hours of sleep and no emotional abuse can do for your skin, Rachel laughed, taking a sip. Speaking of your past life, Lily said, her tone shifting to something more serious as she tapped her tablet. The final liquidation of Miller Group is scheduled for next Monday. Rachel's smile didn't fade, but her eyes grew quiet. Is it? Yes, Lily said, showing her the screen. After Chloe's fake pregnancy was exposed, the police charged her with felony assault. She's currently serving an 18-month sentence in a women's correctional facility. As for Ethan, he tried to sue us to get his shares back, but Sarah Lynn crushed him in court. The judge ruled that his financial misconduct and public breach of fiduciary duty invalidated his claims. Lily scrolled down, showing a picture of a dilapidated building. The bank has foreclosed on his apartment. The corporate office has been seized to pay off the defaulted construction loans. He's completely bankrupt, Rachel. He's living in a tiny basement room in the suburbs, working as a night shift logistics clerk just to pay off his legal debts. Rachel looked at the picture of the grand building that used to house their dreams. She felt no anger, no satisfaction, no desire for revenge. She felt absolutely nothing. To her, Ethan Miller was simply a stranger she had met in a previous life. A ghost that had long since been laid to rest. Rachel, Lily asked gently, do you want me to block his name from any future reports? You don't have to look at this. No, it's fine, Rachel said, setting her cup down. He's just a name on a piece of paper now. It doesn't affect me anymore. There is one more thing, Lily said, looking slightly hesitant. He flew to Zurich yesterday. Rachel paused. How did he afford a plane ticket? He apparently sold his mother's old engagement ring, the only valuable thing he had left, Lily said, her face grim. He's been standing outside our building since this morning. The security team wanted to have him removed, but I wanted to check with you first. Rachel walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass window. Down on the snow-covered street, 30 stories below, a tiny, dark figure was standing near the entrance of the plaza. He was wearing a thin, worn winter coat, shivering in the freezing Swiss wind, his shoulders hunched as he stared up at the towering glass skyscraper. Rachel looked at him for a long time. Let him come up, she said softly. Lily looked surprised. Are you sure? He might make a scene. He won't, Rachel said, her voice filled with absolute, unshakable calm. And even if he does, he no longer has the power to hurt me. 10 minutes later, the private elevator doors chimed and slid open. Ethan stepped into the luxurious executive reception area. He looked terrible. His face was gaunt, his skin a pasty, unhealthy gray. His fingers were red and raw from the cold, and his cheap, worn-out shoes were soaked through with melting snow. He smelled faintly of stale tobacco and cheap instant coffee. He looked around the beautiful, high-ceilinged office, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and intimidation. And then he saw her. Rachel was sitting behind a large, minimalist desk of white oak. The soft morning light poured in through the glass walls, illuminating her like a painting. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, her posture elegant, her expression perfectly serene. She looked like a woman who had never known a day of struggle in her life. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. He took a few hesitant steps forward, his boots leaving wet, muddy tracks on the immaculate gray carpet. Rachel, he whispered, his voice cracking. Rachel didn't stand up. She didn't frown. She simply looked at him, her eyes as calm and clear as a mountain lake. Hello, Ethan, she said, her voice pleasant and completely neutral. Please, sit down. She indicated a comfortable leather chair opposite her desk. Ethan sat down, his hands shaking as he placed them on his knees. He looked at her, his eyes filling with tears. Rachel, I don't even know where to start, he stammered, his chest heaving. I was blind. I was a fool. Chloe, she lied to me about everything. She was never pregnant. She did it all to tear us apart. Rachel listened, her expression unchanging. She looked like a doctor listening to a stranger describe a mild headache. I know, Rachel said softly. I'm so sorry, Rachel. Ethan sobbed, his face twisting with agonizing grief. He slid off the chair, dropping to his knees on the cold floor, just as he had threatened she would do to him. I ruined our family. I let our baby die. I let that monster destroy everything we built. If I could go back and change it, I would cut my own throat before I ever disrespected you. He reached out, trying to grab her hand, but Rachel gently drew her hand back, placing it on her lap. The movement was small, but it was a barrier as solid as a mountain range. Ethan, get up, she said, her voice carrying a gentle authority. Don't do this. Rachel, please, he begged, his tears dripping onto the pristine carpet. Just give me one more chance. I don't care about the company. I don't care about the money. I just want you back. I'll work as your assistant. I'll wash your car. I'll do whatever you want. Just let me be near you again. Please. Rachel looked down at him. She remembered the young boy who had tattooed her name over his heart in a cold, cramped apartment 10 years ago. She remembered the love she had once felt for him, a love so deep she was willing to die for him. And then, she felt the silence in her soul. The love wasn't gone because of anger. It wasn't gone because of revenge. It was simply gone. Ethan, Rachel said, her voice incredibly gentle, yet completely devoid of warmth. Do you know what the opposite of love is? Ethan looked up at her, his face tear-stained and desperate. Hate. No, Rachel said, offering him a small, polite smile. The opposite of love is indifference. She leaned back in her chair, looking at him with the same polite, detached gaze she would give to a minor supplier whose contract she was declining to renew. I don't hate you, Ethan. I don't wish you any harm. I don't even care about the shares or the money you lost. To me, you're simply a part of my past that has reached its logical conclusion. Rachel. When you left me bleeding on that hospital floor, Rachel continued, her voice steady and calm. You didn't just kill our baby. You killed the woman who loved you. The Rachel who would have forgiven you. The Rachel who would have starved. With you, she is dead. You killed her yourself. She stood up, walking over to the window, looking out at the beautiful, snow-covered Alps in the distance. The woman standing in front of you today is Rachel Vance. She doesn't know you. She doesn't owe you anything. And she certainly doesn't have any room in her life for a man who treats loyalty as a transaction. Ethan sat on the floor, his hands falling limp to his sides. The absolute finality in her voice was worse than any scream, worse than any curse. It was the sound of a door locking from the inside, with the key thrown into the deepest part of the ocean. Is there really nothing left? He whispered, his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Nothing, Rachel said, turning to look at him one last time. Goodbye, Ethan. I hope you find a way to live with yourself. She pressed a button on her desk. Marcus, please have security escort Mr. Miller out of the building. And please buy him a warm coat and a ticket back to his city. Put it on my personal account. Yes, Director Vance. Two tall, polite security guards entered the room. They gently but firmly helped Ethan to his feet and led him toward the elevator. Ethan didn't fight them. He walked like a man who had already died, his eyes fixed on Rachel until the elevator doors finally slid shut, erasing her from his sight forever. The office fell into a quiet, peaceful silence. Lily walked in, looking at Rachel with soft, admiring eyes. Are you okay? Rachel took a deep, clean breath of the crisp Swiss air filtering through the ventilation. She felt the warmth of the hot chocolate in her hands, the solid weight of the floor beneath her feet, and the endless promise of the cold, beautiful winter sky outside. I'm perfect, Rachel said, a bright, genuine smile spreading across her face. Now let's get back to work.